Next up, 5 terrifying ghost stories as told by you. Number 5, The Kind Nurse.
I was 11 years old, and it was hours after I'd had surgery I woke up. Of course, I was in pain, so I stayed in the hospital for some days. I had a hard time breathing because there was nothing to blow my nose with, so I tried to call a nurse. After all, I needed tissues, but since it was nighttime, there were no people around. Suddenly, a nurse came in and opened up a small packet of cotton swabs, added cream to them, and was like, "Hold on, let me help you with that." While smiling after she rubbed them on my nose, I could breathe better now, and she threw the packet in the trash can and said, "There, that's better now," and left the room. Then I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I woke up, and the small packet was gone from the trash. My assigned nurse was confused when I told her about the nurse who helped me. She asked, "What did she look like?" "Asian with black hair," I replied. She was confused because there wasn't a nurse of that description that night. She was also confused because how would a nurse have known I couldn't breathe? So how would that kind spirit have known about me needing help to breathe? Also, to mention, her presence was really cold, even though it wasn't that cold in that room. I didn't pick up on that at first, but the more I think about it, that was weird. I told many friends and family about this, and they were shocked too. One of them says it might have been an angel or a very kind spirit.
Number 4, The Visitations.
I have had many different types of visitations from my point of view. From dark figures in my bedroom doorway that I couldn't really see no matter how hard I tried, to being picked up off my bed by an unseen person entity, having someone or something grab my ankles while in bed and try to pull me off, to something sitting on my chest while I could not move or open my eyes and growl and snarl right into my face, being able to feel the heat of its breath on my face. The worst time was when I believed myself to be awake. I was in bed, it was dark, no lights on. My bedroom door opened and I could see a dark shadow, darker than the area around it, crawling around on the floor. I heard it coming around the bottom of the bed. I could hear it breathing, growling. I was laying on my side at the time facing the door. I felt the bed depress as it climbed up on the bed. I could not move. At this point, I was on my side, unable to move, and I could feel it on the bed where my back was. I felt it start to press against my back like it was trying to enter me. I was so terrified at that point I passed out from fear. I thought for sure I was going to die. A lot of this happened in my mid to late 20s to early 30s. It got so bad I refused to sleep in my room or go in there at all. This mostly happened after my parents purchased the empty lot next to us and were doing construction for a garage. But after I moved, it continued to happen at the new place. I was desperate for answers and reached out to a local paranormal group and informed them of my experiences. They told me that it sounded like hypnagogic hallucinations. Rather than continue to be terrified in my own home, I chose to see this as the answer. However, the terror of that night has never left me. I am now 49 years old.
Number 3, The Helpful Boy.
A month ago, I was riding my bike home after school, and I was in a pretty bad mood because of school stuff. My mind was preoccupied, and I was thinking about random stuff until at a point, I took a turn and motorbike came straight at me. It didn't hit me. Instead, it turned at the right time. But me, being a scaredy cat, lost balance and fell off my bike. The person who rode the motorbike stopped and turned around to help me. He was a really sweet person. He helped me up and kind of fixed my bike's chain because of the fall. It was also raining and my jacket had gotten all dirty and messed up. He handed me his coat. After that, he insisted on walking me home because my knee got injured. He also took my bike in hand. I agreed and we started walking. He introduced himself as Gavin and he was 19 and I introduced myself. We talked and I ended up telling him about what was bothering me, and at some points he laughed. Some points he supported me. We were about to reach my street, but I thought it would be wise to let him drop me by my street instead of my house for reasons like stranger danger and my strict parents. So I let him drop me by my street. Before leaving, he told me, "Life is like a broken puzzle, which sometimes you need to either stick or tape the torn pieces into a complete one to let the whole puzzle make sense." Believe it or not, that advice made so much sense. We said our goodbyes, and before leaving, he placed a kiss on my forehead. I was touched, and I might have grown to have a slight crush right there. We parted ways, and here's where things didn't make sense. I must have taken 2 steps before I turned around to watch him leave, but he wasn't there. It was as if he disappeared into thin air. I took a turn and tried searching for him, but he wasn't there. He could not have possibly run that fast for him to completely disappear. Even if he did run, I should have heard his footsteps, but he wasn't there. I reached home and sat down on my bed, recalling this whole experience, from the almost crash to me leaving him outside my street. I realized, except for his name, I didn't know anything about him. I did ask him once where he studied, but he seemed almost hesitant to answer until he told me some college in Amsterdam. The next day on my way to school, I stopped. I saw a coat. I picked it up and the sense of chills ran through me because it was the same coat Gavin handed to me. It had the initials GK on the sleeves. I was scared and didn't believe what was going on because why would Gavin's coat be lying on the middle of the bike path? I left the coat and I was paranoid the whole day. Later that night, I had a dream of my dead best friend who passed away 3 years ago. He was there with me, and we were simply talking until I saw his motorbike, which he was sitting on while I was sitting on some rock. The motorbike seemed so familiar, and then it clicked for me. It was Gavin's motorbike. I looked up at my best friend and pointed at the bike with a very paranoid expression. He looked down at the bike and then up at me with a playful smirk. I woke up sweating and panting at that dream. Nothing made sense at that point. This whole experience made me want to believe I was crazy. I tried talking to my friends here, but they said I was going insane.
Number 2. The Hotel Spirits.
My husband and I and our cat live in a hotel. The hotel used to be an asylum for the criminally insane, and the basement was a morgue way back in the day. Out of all the rooms we lived in, there was one room in particular that had the most paranormal activity, and it was a negative experience. When we first moved into that room, right away the energy felt off. The atmosphere just felt heavy and depressing. One night my cat, Selene, was following something invisible around the room. She kept trying to climb the wall and kept looking up at the ceiling with her eyes moving frantically in every direction. I could feel how uncomfortable she was by all the energy she was giving off. I tried to pet her to calm her down, but she pinned her ears at me and gave me an angry look. Now, Selene is one of the most sweetest cats in the world and extremely friendly with people, so by her suddenly acting like this was definitely out of the ordinary. So, I backed off and laid down in bed while watching TV, and then Selene jumped up on her cat tree, which was about a foot away from where I was laying, and when I looked over at her, she still had her ears pinned, and she was literally giving me the death stare, looking so angry. She wouldn't stop staring at me. I started getting scared. Every move I made while in bed, she looked like she was ready to pounce. I never felt scared of my cat, ever, until that day. I was so afraid to move, so I just laid in bed, not moving, and hysterically crying. The energies in the room were strong and angry. Finally, Selene calmed down and returned to her old self. I hesitated to pet her at first, but her energy reassured me that she was okay. I cried with relief when I scooped her up in my arms and held her close. Days later, my husband and I were moving to a different room. As my husband was grabbing the last bit of storage from our old room, he suddenly sensed negative, eerie energy around him, and it freaked him out. My cat and I were already in the new room at the time. My husband was in the old room, feeling these negative energies. My husband isn't really a firm believer in spirits. He tries to find more logical explanations for things, but this time when he admitted to me that he felt those strange energies, something was definitely in that room.
If you enjoy short ghost stories, please consider liking and subscribing. Now, let's get on with it. Number 1. We have multiple ghosts.
During the first 8 months of me living here in this house that was built in the 1800s, I saw a black shadow figure of a girl that dragged my dog under the bed. My dog was held under my bed for 10 minutes. My parents didn't believe what I saw until they had their own experience. One night, my sister stopped breathing, and I was asleep next to her. I didn't wake up, and I don't have a history of sleepwalking. My dad said he was suddenly awoken by a girl that looked just like me. He said the girl sounded, acted, and even looked exactly like me. She even wore the same thing I wore to bed that night. So that, of course, made my dad believe it was me. He told me the girl was saying in a stern voice like I do when I try to wake him up, "Dad, get up. Alexa is not breathing." My dad tried to fall back asleep, but she wouldn't let him. Once my dad was sat up in bed and putting on his slippers, he walked to the stairs fast and she was gone. He didn't even hear her going down the stairs, which creak like crazy. My dad and Mum went downstairs and got my sister responsive and breathing. My dad then forcefully woke me up and accused me of going back to sleep when my sister wasn't breathing. I told him he was crazy, and I had no idea what he was talking about. He told me the story, and I knew he'd seen a ghost. When my mum heard the story, she laughed and told my dad he was crazy until she walked back up the stairs to go to bed, and she heard a little girl aggressively say, "Boo." My mum came running down the stairs to tell us what she heard, and my dad looked at her and called her crazy. The only other thing we heard as a family were footsteps. We were all sitting down having dinner one night when all of us went silent. We heard men's work boots stomping around upstairs. My dad grabbed his gun and walked up the stairs. He went through every room with our old dog, Tank, who was a Rottweiler. They both came back down and found nothing. My dad had experiences too. First, of course, it was the little girl. Then one night it was 3 a.m, and he was asleep in his chair. Suddenly he was thrown, with his chair across the living room. He woke up and was lying on the floor with his recliner, and he got up and put it back in place and went back to sleep. He then told me he was asleep in his chair, which is right by a vent that leads to the basement, when suddenly he heard a man's voice say, "Well, hello." My dad got his gun and Tank and told Tank to go through every room in the basement. Tank did as he was told and came back with no one. My dad also found nobody. Now, at 15 years old, I have been having experiences at night. I've experienced seeing a man who looked very malnourished and lean, staring at my closet, and when I tried to ask who he was, he turned and smiled at me, then disappeared. I then saw a little girl who had long dark hair, who was staring at my closet too, and when I was asking her who she was, she didn't turn around, just disappeared. I then saw a little girl at the foot of my bed, who laughed, and she jumped and tried to bite my arm, but then she disappeared. Every time I see these people, I jump out of bed and just run. I don't know where I'm going, but I just run. I need help, and I need advice on what to do in this situation of multiple experiences.